Crack! Crack! The sharp reports of M4 rifles split the morning air at Fort Carson's firing range. Sarah Mitchell jerked violently, her whole body flinching as if each bullet was tearing through her chest. She pressed herself against the concrete wall, clutching her medical bag like a lifeline, trying to make herself invisible in the furthest corner of the range. "Holy cow, look at her!" Sergeant Derek Thompson's voice boomed across the range. The 6'2" mountain of muscle turned away from his target, his broad shoulders shaking with laughter. "Yo, Doc! This ain't a library. Medics don't fight, remember?" The entire squad erupted in laughter. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez whistled mockingly through his teeth. "Bet she wets herself if someone yells bang." Sarah took another step back, her shoulder blades pressing hard against the cold concrete. Her brown eyes, flecked with gold in the harsh morning light, widened with each gunshot. Her hands trembled as they unconsciously fingered the worn dog tags hidden beneath her uniform, a detail no one noticed in the dim pre-dawn light. "Pathetic," Thompson spat on the ground near her feet. "Hayes should ship this coward back to the hospital where she belongs. Leave the real work to actual soldiers." But they didn't see the way Sarah's jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. They didn't notice the peculiar V-shaped scar on her right wrist, barely visible beneath her sleeve. They didn't hear her whispered words, barely more than a breath. Not again, never again. In 20 minutes, on a deadly road 8,000 miles away, they would understand why a medic feared the sound of gunfire, and why that fear would save all their lives. The morning had started like every other at Fort Carson. Sarah's alarm buzzed at 05:30 hours, dragging her from another nightmare. Syria again. Always Syria. She sat up in her bunk, sheets soaked with cold sweat, and began her ritual. Count to 100, check the medical kit 3 times, every bandage, every tourniquet, every morphine syringe in its place. Her hands shook as she reached for the prescription bottle hidden in her footlocker. Propranolol. For the tremors, the doctor had said. For the anxiety. She dry swallowed 2 pills, then carefully hid the bottle again. No one could know. From beneath her pillow, she pulled out a photograph, creased and worn from handling. 4 figures in tactical gear, faces deliberately blurred. She traced a finger over each shadow. "I'm just a medic now," she whispered to the ghosts in the picture. "Just a medic." By 0600 hours, she was in the mess hall, sitting alone in the corner, furthest from the boisterous infantry soldiers. She picked at her eggs, trying to ignore the loud voices and sudden movements that made her shoulders tense. "Scared of breakfast too?" Thompson's tray slammed down on her table, making her jump. Coffee splashed across the metal surface. Rodriguez appeared at Thompson's shoulder, making a gun with his fingers. Bang! Sarah's whole body jerked. Her coffee cup tumbled, brown liquid spreading across the table. The surrounding tables burst into laughter. Someone pulled out a phone, recording her reaction. "For heaven's sake," Rodriguez laughed. "She's jumpier than a recruit on his first day." Corporal Lance, one of the unit's other medics, frowned from a nearby table. Something about Sarah's startled response wasn't right. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, more practiced. Like her body was remembering something her mind was trying to forget. Thompson leaned in close, his breath hot on Sarah's face. 2 weeks, Doc. 2 weeks until we deploy to Iraq. You planning to hide behind your medical bag the whole time? What happens when the bullets are real?" Sarah's hands continued to shake as she mopped up the spilled coffee with methodical precision. 3 napkins, folded exactly the same way. Everything had to be precise, controlled. It was the only way to keep the memories at bay. "Answer me when I'm talking to you," Thompson growled. "Yes, Sergeant," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes. What?" "Yes, I understand we deploy in 2 weeks. And you're going to be useless to us, aren't you?" He stood up, addressing the entire mess hall. "Everyone, meet our combat medic who's afraid of combat. Maybe we should get her a whistle instead of a rifle. She can blow it when she needs a real soldier to protect her." More laughter, more phones recording. Sarah kept her eyes on the table, counting the scratches in the metal surface. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like the bodies in... No. She was just a medic now. Just a medic. If watching someone get dismissed because of their trauma strikes a nerve with you, then this story matters. Take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps these tales reach more people. For those amazing souls who want to support even deeper, there's a thanks button below that keeps me writing through the night. But right now, let's return to Fort Carson, where Sarah's nightmare is just beginning. The firing range was mandatory. Every soldier had to qualify with their weapon before deployment, even medics. Sarah had tried to be last in line, hoping somehow she'd run out of time, but Thompson had other plans. "Ladies first, Doc." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her bicep, and dragged her to the firing line. "Can't have our medic failing her quals. Although," he laughed, "looking at those shaking hands, I'm betting you can't even hold it steady." He shoved an M4 into her hands. The weight of it, the smell of gun oil, the cold metal against her palms, it all came rushing back. Syria, the weight of her rifle, the smell of cordite and blood, the sound of, "Safety's still on, genius." Thompson's voice cut through the flashback. "This is incredible. Our medic doesn't even know how to operate a basic rifle. Hey, Rodriguez, come see this." Sarah's fingers moved to the safety selector. The motion was automatic, practiced, her thumb finding the switch without looking. She caught herself and fumbled, making it look clumsy, but Lance noticed. The way her hands had moved for just a second, that was muscle memory. Expert muscle memory. "5 rounds, the range instructor called out. "Make them count." Sarah raised the rifle to her shoulder. Through the scope, the target swam in and out of focus. Not because she couldn't see it clearly, but because she was fighting every instinct in her body. Her stance was wrong, deliberately wrong. Feet too close together, weight distributed poorly. Shoulder not properly seated against the stock. She fired 5 shots. 2 hit the target dead center, clustered so tightly they could have been covered by a quarter. The other 3 went wide, missing the target entirely. "Lucky shots," Thompson crowed. "Even a broken clock is right twice a day. But 3 complete misses? Pathetic. How did you even make it through basic training?" What he didn't see was the precision required to miss that badly on purpose, to override every instinct, every hour of training, every mission where missing meant dying. Sarah had placed those 3 shots exactly where she wanted them, safely into the berm behind the targets. Lieutenant Colonel Webb appeared at the edge of the range, and Sarah's blood ran cold. Unlike the others, he wore civilian clothes, but the Glock 19 on his hip marked him as someone with special privileges. He watched her with an expression she recognized all too well, the look of someone who knew more than they were saying. He pulled out an encrypted phone and typed something quickly, his eyes never leaving Sarah. The afternoon brought combat lifesaver training, Sarah's domain. Here, at least, she could hide behind her medical knowledge. Bandages and tourniquets didn't require her to face her demons. Or so she thought. What if the medic gets shot first? Thompson interrupted her demonstration on controlling bleeding. "Who saves the savior, huh?" The class of 30 soldiers turned to watch, sensing another opportunity for entertainment at Sarah's expense. "That's why we train everyone in basic first aid," Sarah replied quietly, continuing to wrap the practice dummy's arm. "But what if you're under fire?" Thompson persisted. "Let's make this realistic. Rodriguez, play some combat sounds on your phone. Let's see if our scared little medic can even tie a tourniquet when the bullets are flying." Rodriguez grinned and pulled out his phone. The sharp crack of AK-47 fire filled the training room. Sarah's hands froze. The sound transported her instantly, not to a training room at Fort Carson, but to a bombed-out building in Aleppo. The smell of blood and cordite, the weight of her rifle, the child stepping out of the shadows, something in his hands, and her finger on the trigger, and the tourniquet slipped from her numb fingers, clattering to the floor. "She can't even tie a knot!" Thompson's laughter boomed across the room. "This is our combat medic, people, the person who's supposed to save your life when things go bad. Feel confident?" Captain Hayes appeared in the doorway. "Mitchell, my office, now." Sarah followed him out, her legs unsteady. Behind her, she could hear Thompson organizing bets on how long she'd last in Iraq. The smart money was on first firefight. Hayes' office was Spartan, Just a desk, 2 chairs, and a wall of certificates and commendations. He didn't sit, just stood behind his desk studying a file that Sarah recognized as her own. "Your file is unusual," he said finally. "Lots of redacted sections, medical degree from Johns Hopkins, but you enlisted instead of coming in as an officer. That's irregular." "Yes, sir. I'm considering transferring you to a non-combat role. We have 2 weeks before deployment. That's enough time to—" "Yes, sir, that would be—" Sarah started to agree, relief flooding through her, but Hayes cut her off. "After deployment, we need the numbers. Can't afford to be down a medic, even a—" He paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Challenged one, but when we get back, we'll revisit this conversation." Dismissed. Sarah saluted and left, her mind racing. If she could just survive 2 weeks in Iraq, she could disappear again. Find another identity, another unit, another place to hide. She'd done it before. During equipment check, Sarah's medical kit contained military-grade diagnostic tools, including a portable ultrasound system designed for battlefield trauma assessment. The ruggedized tablet interface provided instant vital sign analysis and automated treatment recommendations, technology that could mean the difference between life and death when every second counted in combat zones. That evening, Lance found her in the barracks, sitting on her bunk, organizing her medical supplies for the dozenth time. Everything had to be perfect, in place, controlled. "Your stress response isn't normal fear," he said quietly, sitting on the opposite bunk. "I've seen it before, in guys coming back from bad operations. It's trauma." Sarah didn't look up from her bandages. "I'm just not cut out for this." Lance studied her for a moment, then pulled out a field manual. "Thought you might find this interesting, especially Chapter 7. He left it on her bunk and walked away. Sarah glanced at the cover. Advanced marksmanship, sniper tactics, and techniques. Chapter 7 was about shooting under extreme stress, how to control breathing, how to compensate for tremor, how to make impossible shots when your body was betraying you. She pushed the manual away. She was just a medic now, just a medic. But that night, when everyone was asleep, she found herself flipping through the pages. The techniques were familiar, too familiar. She'd taught some of them herself, in another life, when she wore a different name and carried a rifle instead of bandages. The week passed in a blur of mockery and preparation. Every meal brought new humiliation. Thompson had taken to throwing food at her. Target practice, he called it. Her gear was constantly being hidden or sabotaged. During morning PT, she was perpetually tripped or pushed accidentally. Weak medic, they called her. Liability. Dead weight. Each insult was another stone added to the wall she'd built around herself. She accepted them all without complaint. It was her penance. For Syria. For the choices she'd made. For the lives she'd taken and the lives she'd failed to save. 7 days before deployment, the pressure reached a crescendo. Final combat drills. Last chance to prepare for the reality of Iraq. Sarah failed every exercise. During the simulated convoy ambush, when the fake IED exploded, she froze completely. Stood in the middle of the training ground, unable to move, unable to think. Transported back to that moment when everything went wrong. Thompson had to tackle her into cover, screaming in her face. "You're going to get someone killed. You're a liability." The video went viral within the base. "Statue Sarah," they called her. Someone spray-painted graffiti on the latrines. "Medics don't fight or move." Rodriguez's prank was the breaking point. He'd hidden a firecracker in her medical bag, rigged to explode when she opened it. The bang wasn't loud by military standards, but to Sarah, it might as well have been a bomb. She screamed, dropping to her knees, hands over her ears. The flashback hit her like a physical blow. Aleppo, 2021. The explosion that ended everything. 3 teammates down. Blood everywhere. And her fault. All her fault. Because she'd hesitated. Because she'd seen a child where others saw a threat. Because she'd tried to save everyone and ended up saving no one. She curled into a ball in the corner, rocking back and forth, lost in memories that wouldn't stop playing. The room fell silent. Even Thompson looked shocked. Holy, she's really messed up. In the chaos, her uniform shirt tore, revealing scars. Not random injuries, but precise patterns. gunshot wounds in the gaps where tactical armor would leave a person vulnerable. Wounds that spoke of someone who'd been specifically, deliberately targeted by someone who knew exactly where to shoot. Lance knelt beside her, his voice low. "Those are torture scars!" Webb appeared as if from nowhere, clearing the room with a single gesture. As soldiers filed out, he typed rapidly on his encrypted phone. Anyone close enough might have glimpsed the screen. "Asset confirmed. Scorpion active." The reply came instantly. "Maintain cover. He's coming." Webb looked at Sarah, still curled in the corner, and for just a moment, his professional mask slipped. What showed beneath was pity. The day before deployment arrived with the inevitability of a rising tide. Sarah packed her equipment with mechanical precision, medical supplies triple-checked, personal items minimal, just the photograph and a few changes of clothes. Everything she owned fit in one bag, ready to run, always ready to run. The C-130 lifted off from Peterson Air Force Base at 0400 hours, carrying them toward a war that Sarah had tried so hard to leave behind. She sat in the back, as far from the weapons racks as possible. Thompson had made sure of that. "Doc sits in the safest spot," he announced to the plane. "Can't have our scared little medic getting hurt before she even sees combat." What he didn't know was that the rear of the aircraft was actually the most vulnerable to certain types of attacks. But Sarah didn't correct him. She just counted her morphine syrettes for the 10th time and tried not to think about where they were going. Halfway across the Atlantic, turbulence hit hard. The plane bucked and rolled, throwing unsecured items around the cabin. Private Miller, 19 years old and on his first deployment, started hyperventilating. Sarah moved through the chaos like water flowing around rocks. While others stumbled and grabbed for handholds, she glided between the seats with perfect balance. Her hands found pressure points on Miller's neck and wrists, ancient techniques that slowed his racing heart and eased his panic. "How'd she move like that?" Thompson muttered, watching her navigate the bucking aircraft as if she was walking on solid ground. At the refueling stop in Kuwait, an old supply sergeant stopped dead when he saw Sarah. His weathered face creased in concentration. "You look familiar. Ever work with the Night Stalkers?" The Night Stalkers. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. The most elite helicopter unit in the military, who flew the most dangerous missions into the most hostile territories. "Common face, Sergeant," Sarah replied quickly, turning away. But the old soldier wasn't convinced. There was something about the way she moved, the way her eyes constantly scanned for threats even in the secure confines of a U.S. base. He'd seen that before, in operators who'd spent too long in the shadows. Rumors flew through the unit faster than the plane carrying them to war. Sarah was a washed-out Air Force para-rescue jumper. She'd crashed a helicopter and couldn't fly anymore. She'd failed some elite program and been demoted to regular medic. Each story was more elaborate than the last, and none of them came close to the truth. When Captain Hayes called her into his makeshift office in Kuwait, he had a file open on his desk. "I pulled some strings," he said. "Found out you were Air Force para-rescue, washed out after a training accident. The records were good, very good. Someone had spent a lot of time and effort creating this false history." Sarah played along, letting her shoulders slump with remembered failure. "Yes, sir. I couldn't handle the pressure." "That explains the medical training, but not the—" Hayes gestured vaguely. "Issues. PJs are tough. What happened to you?" "I don't like to talk about it, sir." Hayes dismissed her, satisfied he'd solved the mystery, a failed elite medic. It explained her skills and her trauma. It was a story people could understand and accept. But Webb knew those records were fabricated, just like the 3 other identities that had been burned in the past 2 years. Someone was hunting Sarah Mitchell, and they were getting closer. The flight to Iraq stretched endlessly. Sarah dozed fitfully, waking every time someone moved too quickly or laughed too loud. In her dreams, she was back in Syria, watching her teammates fall, feeling their blood on her hands, hearing Scorpion's voice. "Your weakness killed them." Rodriguez surprised everyone by seeking her out during a quiet moment. "My cousin was Delta," he said quietly. "Died in Syria 5 years ago. You move like him, breathe like him. I don't know what you are, but if things go bad over there, I got your back." It was the first crack in the wall of mockery that had surrounded her since she arrived at Fort Carson. Sarah didn't know how to respond. She'd accepted their cruelty as her due, her punishment. Kindness was harder to bear. Forward operating base. Prosperity squatted on the outskirts of Baghdad like a concrete tumor. The moment they arrived, the reality of Iraq hit them. 120-degree heat. Dust that infiltrated everything. The constant hum of generators and distant percussion of explosions. Within minutes of their arrival, the base came under mortar attack. Sirens wailed as soldiers scrambled for bunkers. Sarah didn't run. She stood in the open, head tilted, listening to the whistle of incoming rounds. "Next one hits grid 247, she said quietly. Seconds later, an explosion rocked that exact location. Lucky guess. Or the kind of calculation that came from years of experience. Webb watched from a doorway, confirming something on his phone. Setting up the aid station, Sarah arranged supplies with tactical precision, clear fields of fire from the treatment table, multiple exit routes identified and kept clear, supplies positioned for quick access, but also for cover if needed. She was preparing for a siege, not a medical facility. Lance noticed immediately. "You expecting an attack here? Inside the base?" Sarah caught herself. "Always expect—" She stopped, biting back words that belonged to another life. "Just being thorough." Seeing Sarah broken on the floor, traumatized yet still targeted, have you ever faced demons from your past that won't let go? If this struggle between survival and trauma hits close to home, drop a comment below, sharing your thoughts. Every perspective matters in stories like these. Now, as deployment day arrives with a mission to the most dangerous road in Iraq, the mission briefing came at 0500 hours the next morning. Route Irish. The most dangerous road in Iraq, running from the Green Zone to Baghdad International Airport. 7 miles of kill zones and ambush sites. "Routine convoy," Captain Hayes announced. 4 MR apps, standard spacing. We're escorting supply trucks to the Green Zone. Sarah was assigned to the last vehicle with the medical supplies. Thompson smirked. "Safest spot for our scared medic, tail end Charlie, less likely to hit an IED." In reality, the last vehicle was the most vulnerable to complex ambushes. It was the easiest to isolate, cut off from support, and destroy. But Sarah didn't correct him. She was just a medic. Medics didn't understand tactical deployments. As they prepared to roll out, Sarah found herself checking the weapons of her vehicle crew. "Just making sure they work," she explained when Martinez gave her a strange look. Her hands moved over his rifle with practiced ease, adjusting the scope without conscious thought. The elevation was wrong for urban engagement. She dialed it to 300 meters, the perfect distance for a skilled marksman to engage from a rooftop while staying out of effective return fire range. "How did you know to do that?" Martinez asked. "Lucky guess." The convoy rolled out at 0600 hours. 4 mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, 30 tons of armor and firepower each. Sarah sat in the back of Vehicle 4, medical bag at her feet, counting her breaths. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. A technique to manage anxiety, or to prepare for a precision shot. Baghdad rolled past the windows, burned cars shoved to the sides of the road. Crater marks from previous IEDs filled with dirt and gravel. The city felt empty, which every soldier knew was a bad sign. When the locals disappeared, it meant they knew something was coming. "We should abort," Sarah said suddenly. Thompson's voice crackled over the radio from the lead vehicle. "Who said that?" "Your scared medic," Martinez replied. "She's spooked already." Laughter filled the communication net. But Sarah wasn't spooked. She was reading the environment like a book written in a language only a few could understand. The pattern of the burned cars, the placement of the craters, the angles of observation from the surrounding buildings. It all screamed ambush. They approached Underpass Checkpoint 7, a concrete bridge that created a perfect choke point. Sarah's breathing changed. She started counting in Russian, so quietly no one else could hear. Odin, DVA, try. Her hands moved without conscious thought, checking magazines, chambering rounds, preparing for something her conscious mind was still denying. "Stop the convoy!" The words tore from her throat before she could stop them. She grabbed the radio, violating all protocol. "IED pattern. Right side, white bag. Thompson's response was immediate and furious. "Shut up! I'm in charge here, not—" The explosion cut him off, but it wasn't where Sarah had indicated. It was behind them, sealing off their retreat route. Sarah's tactical medical vest contained integrated biomonitor sensors, providing real-time vital statistics of wounded personnel, military-grade technology that transmitted patient data to tablet displays for rapid triage decisions. The system's AI-assisted diagnostics could predict blood loss rates and recommend treatment priorities when managing multiple casualties. Sarah whispered a single word that made Lance's blood run cold. Scorpion. It was a textbook ambush pattern, but not one used by regular insurgents. This was special operations tactics, the kind taught in the darkest corners of the intelligence world, the kind that Sarah shouldn't have been able to recognize unless... The lead vehicles pushed forward, trying to escape the kill zone. They drove straight into the real ambush. The world exploded into chaos. Machine gun fire erupted from 3 buildings simultaneously. RPGs streaked from rooftops. The lead vehicle took a direct hit, flipping onto its side. Thompson's voice cut off mid-scream. Sarah sat frozen in the back of Vehicle 4, her internal war playing out on her face. The medical bag at her feet called to her. That's what she was now, a healer, someone who saved lives, not took them. But the rifle in the rack next to her seat whispered different truths, about skills that never really went away, about muscle memory that survived trauma, about debts that could never be repaid. "Contact left, contact right, we're surrounded." Martinez's voice cracked with panic. The radio crackled to life with a voice that made Sarah's blood freeze. Not Arabic, not the broken English of insurgents. Perfect, accented English with a slight British tinge. "Hello, Phantom. 2 years I've waited. 2 years since you let my son die. Let's finish what we started in Syria." The entire convoy heard it. In the sudden silence that followed, Thompson's voice, weak but alive from the overturned lead vehicle, asked the question on everyone's mind. "Who is Phantom?" Sarah closed her eyes. Her hands had stopped shaking. When she opened them again, something had changed. The frightened medic was still there, but underneath, something else was stirring. Something that had been buried, but never truly died. "Not yet," she whispered. "I'm just a medic, just a medic." But as the gunfire intensified and the screaming started, that mantra became harder and harder to believe. The moment of choice was racing toward her like a bullet, and all the medical bags in the world couldn't stop it. Rodriguez's vehicle took an RPG hit. Sarah watched him thrown against the armored wall, his shoulders separating with an audible pop. Blood streamed from a head wound. "Doc! Help!" Miller, the young private she'd helped on the plane, screamed as shrapnel tore through his abdomen. Arterial spray painted the inside of the vehicle red. Sarah reached for her medical bag, then stopped. To help them, she'd have to expose herself to the sniper fire. The shooter, Scorpion, was waiting for exactly that. Waiting for her to choose between her oath as a medic and her survival instincts. Lance dragged a wounded soldier behind the minimal cover of a destroyed tire, looking to Sarah for guidance. The entire unit was being torn apart, and their medic sat frozen, paralyzed by a choice no one else understood. The enemy tactics were surgical, professional. They called out U.S. movements in Arabic, predicting reactions, channeling the convoy into ever tighter kill zones. This wasn't a random insurgent attack. This was a hunter who'd found his prey. "Phantom must choose!" The voice echoed off buildings. "Medic or killer, healer or hunter, show them who you really are." Ammunition ran low. No reinforcements for 20 minutes. Multiple casualties bleeding out. Sarah's hands began to shake again, but this time it wasn't from trauma. It was her body preparing for something it had done many times before. She looked at the medical bag. Her salvation. Her identity for the past 2 years. The promise she'd made to never again be the person who dealt in death instead of life. Then she looked at Thompson, crawling across debris, trailing blood, reaching toward their vehicle. The man who'd mocked her, humiliated her, made her life hell. Dying. "Please," his voice carried across the chaos. Miller screamed again, 19 years old, his whole life ahead of him. Bleeding out while Sarah sat paralyzed by indecision. "Did you catch the name Phantom?" There's a reason Sarah's enemies want her to pick up that rifle so badly. If you're piecing together the clues about her past, share your theory in the comments below. The truth is darker than you might imagine. And now, the moment that changes everything. The choice hung in the air like smoke from the burning vehicles. Sarah could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. Every second she hesitated, more blood spilled, more lives hung in the balance. Webb's voice cut through the chaos on the command net. "Sarah, listen to me. Your sister's school in Virginia. He has assets there. Today, you know what he wants." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her sister, 16 years old, innocent of Sarah's past, believing her older sister was just a medical student who'd enlisted to pay for school. Now, a pawn in a game she didn't even know existed. Sarah's hands stopped shaking. She took a breath, deep, controlled, the kind she used to take before a difficult shot. When she opened her eyes, something fundamental had shifted. The terrified medic was gone, replaced by something colder, more focused, infinitely more dangerous. She dropped the medical bag. Her hands reached for the M4 carbine in the weapon rack. The metal was warm, familiar, like shaking hands with an old friend she'd hoped never to see again. She performed a functions check in 2 seconds flat. Chamber, magazine, optics. Her movements flowed like water, each action precise and economical. "No," Lance breathed, watching the transformation. "Sarah, you don't have to." The rifle came up to her shoulder in one smooth motion. Through the scope, the world narrowed to geometry and wind. 387 meters to the sniper's position. Slight crosswind from the east. Target partially concealed behind concrete barrier. It was an impossible shot for most soldiers. Sarah's finger found the trigger. Surprised, slow squeeze. The fundamentals coming back like they'd never left. Crack! The sniper's rifle tumbled from the 4th floor window, followed a second later by a body. The convoy members who were still conscious stared in stunned silence. Their terrified medic had just made a shot that most trained snipers would have struggled with. And she'd done it without hesitation, without the tremor that had plagued her every movement for 2 years. But Sarah wasn't done. She flowed into motion, exiting the vehicle with liquid grace. The battlefield geometry unfolded in her mind. Angles of fire, covered positions, likely enemy locations. 3 years of trying to forget couldn't erase 15 years of experience. "Rodriguez, shift left, cover sector 2. Her voice carried across the battlefield, different now. Command voice. The voice of someone used to being obeyed in life or death situations. Rodriguez, blood streaming from his head wound, moved without questioning. "Lance, smoke out now! Miller, keep pressure on that wound and count to 30. If you pass out before 30, start over." She moved between covered positions like a ghost, acquiring and eliminating targets with mechanical precision. 12 hostiles in 45 seconds. Each shot was a perfect center mass or headshot. No wasted ammunition, no hesitation. The enemy fire slackened, then stopped. In less than a minute, Sarah had turned a massacre into a victory. But there was no triumph on her face as she sprinted to Thompson's position. He was bad. Shoulder wound had clipped the subclavian artery. Maybe 3 minutes before he bled out. Sarah dropped to her knees beside him, and suddenly she was a medic again. The rifle fell forgotten as her hands worked to save the life of the man who'd tormented her. "Stay with me, Derek," she said, applying direct pressure while fishing for a pressure bandage. "Come on, you're too stubborn to die on me now." Thompson's eyes focused on her face, tears mixed with blood on his cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We didn't know. I didn't know." "Shut up and let me work." But her own tears were falling now. Because she'd picked up the rifle. Because she'd killed again. Because no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape what she was. The radio crackled with Webb's voice. Authentication. Ghost 7. 7. Confirm. Phantom 2. 7. CIA Special Activities Division. 47 confirmed kills. Syria, Yemen, Libya. The words hung in the air like a confession. Everyone heard. Everyone now knew that their coward medic was something else entirely. Hayes's voice, weak from his own injuries. "The Aleppo ghost. You're the one who took out an entire cell solo after refusing orders." The pieces were falling into place for those who followed such things. The Aleppo ghost. The operator who'd gone rogue rather than follow orders to shoot through human shields. Who'd saved dozens of civilians and killed twice as many terrorists in a running gunfight through the streets of Syria. Who'd disappeared after her teammates died, vanishing into the wind like smoke. Rodriguez crossed himself with his good arm. Lance just nodded, as if confirming something he'd suspected all along. But Sarah wasn't listening to their recognition. She was working frantically to save lives. Thompson first, then Miller, then Rodriguez. Her hands moved with the same precision they'd shown with the rifle, but now in service of life rather than death. The aftermath required specialized psychological support technology, including biometric stress monitors that tracked cortisol levels and heart rate variability in real time. These military-grade mental health assessment tools helped identify PTSD triggers and recommended immediate interventions through secure tablet interfaces. As she worked, she talked. Maybe it was the stress, maybe the need to confess, or maybe because these men deserved to know why they'd almost died. Scorpion was my spotter. Syria 2 years ago, we were partners, the best. His son, 8 years old, got recruited by the cell we were targeting. They put him in a suicide vest and sent him out during our operation. Her hands never stopped moving as she spoke, applying tourniquets, administering morphine, performing the brutal mathematics of battlefield triage. I saw the teddy bear in his hand, thought the vest was fake, just meant to slow us down, told my team to hold fire. But Scorpion, he knew his son, knew the vest was real. He took the shot. Thompson's breathing stabilized. Sarah moved to Miller, performing needle decompression on his collapsed lung with steady hands. The vest was real. My 3 teammates moved to shield the civilians when it went off. They died because I hesitated, because I wouldn't shoot a child, and Scorpion blames me for making him kill his own son. The convoy had formed a defensive perimeter now, those who could still fight protecting their medic as she worked. The same men who'd mocked her for being weak now saw the truth. She wasn't weak at all. She was carrying a weight that would have crushed most people. Webb's voice on the radio. Medevac inbound, 5 mics. Sarah, orders from the deputy director. You're recalled immediately. Scorpion knows you're here. More assets are coming. I won't leave them, Sarah said flatly, moving to the next casualty. Not until everyone's stable. That's not a request, Mitchell. Or, should I say, Agent Chen? Sarah's hands paused for just a moment. Chen. She hadn't heard that name in 2 years. Her real name. The one she'd been born with before the agency turned her into a dozen different people. I'm not Agent Chen anymore. I'm not Phantom 27. I'm just a medic. And medics don't leave their patients. The sound of helicopters grew louder. Black Hawks coming in fast and low. As Sarah worked, she became aware of a change in the soldiers around her. They'd closed ranks, weapons facing outward, creating a protective barrier around her. Nobody touches our dock, Rodriguez growled, despite his injuries. The transformation was complete, from pariah to prophet in the span of minutes. But Sarah took no satisfaction from it. Every life she saved was weighted against the 12 she'd just taken. The ledger that could never be balanced. Thompson's hand found hers. Why? He whispered. Why save me after everything? Sarah met his eyes. Because that's what medics do. We save everyone, even the ones who hurt us, especially the ones who hurt us. It's the only way to stay human when you've done the things I've done. The Black Hawks thundered overhead, and Sarah knew her time was running out. Scorpion was still out there. Her sister was in danger. The past she'd tried so hard to bury was clawing its way back to the surface. But for now, in this moment, she was just a medic, saving lives, making up for the ones she'd taken. One patient at a time, one breath at a time, one small act of redemption at a time, even if it could never be enough. The Black Hawks circled overhead like steel vultures, their rotors beating a rhythm that Sarah knew too well. Dust and debris swirled around the convoy's defensive position as the first bird touched down. Men in unmarked uniforms poured out, weapons at the ready, moving with the fluid precision of operators who'd done this 1,000 times before. Sarah didn't look up from her work. Miller's lung had recollapsed, and she was performing her second needle decompression, the long needle finding the space between his ribs with practiced ease. His breathing eased immediately, and she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. One more life wrestling back from death's grip. Agent Mitchell, a familiar voice called over the rotor wash. "Time to go." She recognized him immediately. Marcus Webb, not a lieutenant colonel, but a CIA handler who'd been watching her for who knew how long. The military rank was just another layer of cover in a world built on deception. 5 more minutes, Sarah said without looking up. Rodriguez needs a surgical airway, and Thompson's pressure dressing. Now, Agent Mitchell. The use of her operational name made several soldiers look up sharply. Agent, not specialist, not doc. The final confirmation that everything they thought they knew about their medic was a lie. "I said no." Sarah's voice carried the same command authority she'd used during the firefight. "These are my patients. I don't leave until they're stable." Webb stepped closer, and now she could see the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing options, probably considering whether to have his men physically remove her. But Sarah had positioned herself perfectly, surrounded by wounded soldiers who'd formed a protective barrier. To get to her, they'd have to go through men bleeding for their country. "Doc stays until she's done," Thompson croaked from his stretcher. The man who'd tormented her for weeks, who'd made her life hell, was now her fiercest defender. "Anyone tries to move her answers to me." "And me," Rodriguez added, struggling to sit up despite his injuries. Even in their wounded state, the infantry soldiers presented a united front. The CIA operators hesitated. There were protocols about inter-service conflicts, and nobody wanted to be the one who started a firefight between Americans in the middle of Iraq. Webb's encrypted phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and his face went pale. "Understood." He looked at Sarah with something that might have been fear. "Scorpion just hit your sister's school. Security intercepted him, but he left a message." Sarah's hand stilled on Rodriguez's throat, where she'd been preparing for the emergency airway. "Is she safe? For now? But he says he has all their names, every soldier in this unit, their families. Unless you come alone to finish what you started in Syria." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Every soldier understood the implications. They weren't just targets now. Their loved ones were in the crosshairs of a man with nothing left to lose. "I'll go," Sarah said immediately. "Tell him—" "Like hell you will," Thompson interrupted. "We don't negotiate with terrorists, especially not ones who hide behind children." "You don't understand," Sarah began, but Lance cut her off. "We understand enough. You saved our lives, all of us. Whatever debt you think you owe, you paid it today." The medevac helicopters arrived in a thunder of rotors and dust. Regular Army birds with proper medical crews. Sarah worked alongside them, transferring her patients with detailed handoffs. Morphine administered here, tourniquets applied there, airways secured and monitored. Even in the chaos, she was meticulous. As Thompson was loaded onto a stretcher, he caught her hand. "I'm sorry," he said again, "for everything. I was so wrong about you. You couldn't have known." "That's not an excuse." His grip tightened despite the pain medication flowing through his system. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. Not because of the shooting, because you chose to save the people who hurt you. That's real strength." They loaded him into the helicopter, and Sarah watched it lift off, carrying away the man who'd been her chief tormentor. She felt no satisfaction from his apology, only a bone-deep weariness. She'd broken her vow, picked up a weapon, added 12 more ghosts to the crowd that followed her everywhere. "Ma'am," one of Webb's operators approached cautiously. "We really need to move. Scorpion won't wait long." Sarah looked around at what remained of the convoy. Half the unit was airborne, heading for medical treatment. The rest were forming up, preparing for the trip back to base. Their eyes followed her with something she hadn't seen in 2 years: respect, understanding, and perhaps most disturbing of all, awe. She wasn't their scared medic anymore. She was the Aleppo ghost, the operator who'd chosen conscience over orders, who'd saved civilians at the cost of her own team. The kind of person who became either a legend or a cautionary tale, depending on who was telling the story. "I'll come," she told Webb, "but on my terms. These soldiers get back to base safely first, then we deal with Scorpion." Webb started to protest, but something in her eyes stopped him. This wasn't the shaking, traumatized medic they'd been watching. This was Phantom 27, and even with 12 more kills on her conscience, she was still one of the most dangerous people in Iraq. The ride back to FOB Prosperity passed in tense silence. Sarah sat in the back of the MRAP, her medical bag at her feet, surrounded by soldiers who didn't quite know how to act around her anymore. The transformation was too sudden, too complete. An hour ago, she'd been the unit's embarrassment. Now she was its avenging angel. 47 confirmed kills, someone whispered, before today. Did you see that shot? Almost 400 meters with iron sights. She commanded the whole battlefield, like she could see everything at once. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to shut out their voices. They were turning her into something she'd never wanted to be. A hero, a legend, another story for soldiers to tell in bars. But she wasn't a hero. Heroes didn't let their teams die. Heroes didn't fail to save 8-year-old boys with teddy bears and suicide vests. Back at the base, word had already spread. Soldiers lined the route from the gate to the aid station, watching in silence as the convoy rolled past. Someone had leaked helmet cam footage of the ambush, the scared medic transforming into a precise, lethal machine, the impossible shots, the tactical commands that had saved what should have been a massacre. Sarah ignored them all, heading straight for the aid station. There was inventory to check, supplies to restock, blood to clean from her hands that had already dried to rust-brown flakes. The familiar routine of medical preparation was the only thing keeping her grounded. But Webb was waiting in her sanctuary, along with 2 other men in suits that screamed government bureaucrat, despite the Iraqi heat. Agent Mitchell, the older one began. Deputy Director Harrison, we need to discuss... No. Sarah continued her inventory, not bothering to look at them. I'm done with the agency. Have been for 2 years. Find someone else to clean up your messes. This isn't a request, Harrison's voice hardened. You took an oath. Sarah spun around so fast the men stepped back instinctively. I took a lot of oaths, to my country, to my team, to do no harm. Tell me, which one should I have kept in Aleppo? When you ordered me to shoot through children to get to the target? When my refusal got my team killed? Which oath mattered then? Harrison had the grace to look uncomfortable. The Aleppo situation was regrettable, but Scorpion is now a clear and present danger to American lives. Your former unit is not my responsibility anymore. But even as she said it, Sarah knew it wasn't true. The moment Thompson had reached for her, bleeding and broken, she'd accepted responsibility for all of them. That's what medics did. They carried the weight of every life they touched. He has a list, Webb said quietly. Every soldier in your unit, their families, their histories. He's been planning this for 2 years, Sarah. Aleppo wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Sarah's hand stilled on a package of gauze. How? We think he turned after his son died, went freelance, sold information to the highest bidder, but always with one goal, drawing you out. Every medic he's killed in the last 2 years, they all had something in common. They were all former special operations. He's been looking for you. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like a lead blanket. More deaths on her conscience. Medics who died because someone was looking for her. Where? She asked finally. The ruins at Babylon, where it all started 3 years ago. He wants to finish it where your partnership began. Sarah remembered Babylon, the ancient city where she and Scorpion had first been paired, where they'd saved each other's lives a dozen times over, where they'd become the most effective hunter-killer team in the agency's arsenal, before Syria, before everything went wrong. I'll need my equipment. Harrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Already prepared. Your rifle's been maintained. Your kit's ready. Welcome back, Phantom. I'm not back, Sarah said coldly. This is one mission, to protect my unit. Then I disappear again. And this time, you won't find me. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. Word spread through the base that Doc was going on a mission. Soldiers she'd never met stopped her to shake her hand, to thank her for her service, to tell her their cousin or brother had been in Aleppo and came home because of what she'd done. Sarah endured it all with grinding patience. They wanted her to be their hero, their warrior medic who could switch from healing to killing at will. They didn't understand that every time she picked up a rifle, she lost another piece of the healer she'd tried so hard to become. As the sun set over Iraq, painting the sky the color of blood, Sarah found herself in the barracks, packing her few possessions. The photograph of her old team went into her chest pocket, over her heart, Her medical supplies were distributed among the other medics with detailed notes on usage and dosage. "You're coming back, right?" Lance stood in the doorway, worry etched on his face. "This isn't goodbye?" Sarah didn't answer directly. "Take care of them for me. The ones who were wounded today. Thompson's going to need at least 2 more surgeries on that shoulder. Miller's lung is stable, but watch for signs of tension pneumothorax. Rodriguez..." "Sarah." Lance stepped into the room. "Stop. Just stop. You saved us all today. You don't owe us anything else. I owe everyone." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Every life I take creates a debt. Every patient I save pays a fraction of it. But the ledger never balances. It never will." She shouldered her pack and pushed past him, heading for the helicopter pad where a black bird waited, rotors already turning. Webb stood by the door, now in full tactical gear. "Just like old times," he said. "No," Sarah replied. "Nothing like old times. In the old times, I believed in what we were doing." The flight to Babylon took less than an hour, but it felt like traveling back through time. 3 years ago, she'd made this same flight with Scorpion beside her, planning their next operation, trusting him completely. Now she was flying to face him, knowing only one of them would leave alive. The ruins of Babylon stretched out beneath them, ancient stones casting long shadows in the moonlight. Somewhere down there, a ghost from her past waited with a sniper rifle, and a grief that had curdled into hatred. "Overwatch will be in position in 20 minutes, Webb said through the headset. "Drones are already..." "No." Sarah's voice cut through the radio chatter. "No drones, no Overwatch. This is between him and me. You keep everyone else out." "That's not the plan." "It is now, or I walk away and let him hunt every medic in the service until he finds me again." Webb fell silent. They both knew she meant it. Sarah had learned long ago that the agency valued results over methods, and they needed Scorpion eliminated more than they needed to control how it happened. The helicopter touched down a kilometer from the ruins. Sarah stepped out, feeling the weight of her rifle across her back, the familiar bulk of her tactical vest. But underneath it all, she still wore her medic's insignia. She was both now, healer and killer, and the contradiction was tearing her apart. She moved through the ruins like a shadow, every sense alert. Scorpion was here. She could feel him the way she'd always been able to feel him on operations. That uncanny connection that had made them such an effective team. "Hello, Phantom." His voice echoed off ancient stones, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "I've waited so long for this." Sarah didn't respond. She found a covered position and settled in, controlling her breathing, letting her eyes adjust to the darkness. Somewhere out there, her former partner was doing the same. "Do you know what the hardest part was?" Scorpion continued, his voice carrying on the wind. "It wasn't killing my son. I could have lived with that. It was you making me do it. Your weakness, your inability to make the hard choice." A muzzle flash split the darkness. The round cracked past Sarah's position, missing by inches. He'd revealed his location to make a point. He could have killed her already if that's all he wanted. "They were children," Sarah spoke for the first time, knowing her voice would carry to him. "Armed or not, they were children. They were weapons!" The anguish in his voice was raw, bleeding. "My boy was already dead the moment they strapped that vest on him, but you had to make it harder, had to make me pull the trigger myself." Another shot, closer this time. He was moving, using the ruins to mask his approach. Sarah shifted position, circling opposite, turning it into a deadly dance among the ancient stones. "I see you brought friends," Scorpion said. "CIA cleanup crew waiting in the wings. Tell me, do they know the truth about Aleppo? About the real mission?" Sarah's blood ran cold. "Don't." "Oh, but I think I will. Since we're finishing things, let's finish all of it. Operation Red Sand wasn't about terrorists, was it? It was about eliminating a peace negotiator, someone trying to end a war that was too profitable to stop." The words hung in the air like poison. Everything Sarah had tried to bury, tried to forget. The real reason she'd refused to fire. Not just because of the children, but because the target itself had been wrong. A man working to save lives, branded a terrorist because peace wasn't in the agency's interest. "I didn't know," she whispered, "but I did." Scorpion's laugh was bitter. "I knew and I didn't care. Orders were orders, until you made me kill my son for a lie." They were close now. Sarah could sense it. Two predators stalking each other through ruins that had seen 5,000 years of human violence. Nothing really changed. The weapons got more sophisticated, but people still killed each other for the same old reasons. She saw him first. A shadow against shadows, moving with the same fluid grace she remembered. Time slowed as her rifle came up, the scope finding his center mass. One shot, and it would be over. But Scorpion turned, and in the moonlight she saw his face for the first time in 2 years. The grief had aged him, carved lines of anguish that would never fade. And in his eyes she saw not hatred, but something worse, understanding. "You can't do it," he said simply. "Just like in Aleppo. When it matters, you can't take the shot." He was right. Her finger rested on the trigger, but she couldn't squeeze. Not because he was wrong, but because he was broken, just like her. Two operators shattered by a system that used them up and threw them away. "I'm sorry," she said. "About your son, about everything." Sorry doesn't bring him back. Scorpion raised his own rifle. But maybe this will balance the scales. The shot was perfect. Center mass, right where her armor plates met. The impact drove her back, stole her breath, sent lightning through her chest. But the ceramic held, dispersing the energy. It would leave a bruise the size of a dinner plate, but she'd live. Scorpion knew it too. He'd shot to wound, not kill. "Now we're even," he said, lowering his rifle. "I made you break your oath as a medic. You made me kill my son. The ledger balances." Sarah struggled to breathe through the pain. "It's never balanced. You know that." "No, but maybe we can stop adding to it." He pulled something from his vest, a detonator. "The ruins are wired, enough explosives to ensure neither of us leaves. One push and it all ends here." "John." She used his real name for the first time in years. "You don't have to do this." "Don't I?" He laughed, but it was hollow. "What else is there? Go back to killing for lies? Watch more children die for someone's profit margin? At least this way, we go out on our own terms." Sarah thought of her unit, of Thompson fighting to apologize through his pain, of Rodriguez wanting to become a medic, of all the lives she'd saved and all the ones she'd taken, the ledger that would never balance. "There's another way," she said quietly. "We disappear, both of us. No more agency, no more killing, just gone. You tried that. I found you. Because you were looking, stop looking, let it end." They stood there in the ruins of one of humanity's first civilizations, two broken soldiers holding enough firepower to level city blocks. The moment stretched between them, filled with the weight of shared history and spilled blood. Scorpion's thumb moved on the detonator, but he didn't press it. "They'll never stop hunting us. Then we hunt back, but only the ones who deserve it, the ones who send children to die for profit." Something shifted in his eyes, the possibility of redemption, or at least a different kind of damnation. "You always were too soft, Phantom. And you always confuse cruelty with strength." He smiled then, and for a moment she saw the partner she'd trusted with her life. "Perhaps we can teach each other better ways." The detonator fell from his hand, landing harmlessly in the ancient dust. Sarah lowered her rifle, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. They stood there, two ghosts in the moonlight, neither quite alive nor quite dead. "Your sister's safe," Scorpion said. "She always was. I just needed you to come." "I know." Sarah had known from the moment Webb delivered the threat. Scorpion had many sins on his conscience, but he'd never targeted innocents, not until Aleppo broke him. Webb's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Phantom, report. We heard a shot." Sarah pulled out the earpiece and dropped it in the dirt. Let them wonder. Let them search. By the time they reached the ruins, she and Scorpion would be gone, vanished into the same shadows that had hidden them for years. "So what now?" Scorpion asked. "Now we disappear, for real this time. And maybe, if we save enough lives, the ghosts will quiet down." "You really believe that?" Sarah thought of her unit, of the medics who would carry on her work, of the lives that would be saved because she'd chosen healing over killing. "I have to." They walked out of the ruins together, leaving their rifles behind. The war would continue without them. Others would take their place, pulling triggers and following orders. But not them. Not anymore. 3 months later, Captain Hayes stood before a formation at Fort Carson. The entire unit was there, including Thompson on crutches and Rodriguez with his new medic insignia. They had all healed, in body, if not completely in spirit. "As you know," Hayes began, "Specialist Mitchell has been listed as missing in action following a classified operation in Iraq. However, her impact on this unit will not be forgotten." He unveiled a plaque on the wall of the aid station. Sarah's name, her real name, Chen, was engraved below a simple inscription, "Medics do fight when love demands it." Thompson stepped forward, still unsteady but determined. "Doc saved my life, not just from the bullets, but from becoming someone I wouldn't have been able to live with. She showed us that real strength isn't about being the toughest. It's about choosing to heal even when you have every reason to hurt." One by one, soldiers stepped forward to share their stories, how the scared medic had saved them, how her example had changed them. Rodriguez talked about his medical training, inspired by watching her work. Lance announced a new protocol for identifying and helping soldiers with hidden trauma. As the ceremony concluded, Webb stood at the back, holding a classified file. The official report listed both Phantom 27 and Scorpion as KIA, their bodies supposedly destroyed in an explosion at Babylon. He knew better, but some truths were worth burying. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message. No sender ID, but he knew who it was from. Following a new lead, children being used as soldiers in Somalia. We're going to stop it. Don't follow. P-27. Webb deleted the message and walked away. Somewhere out there, two of the most dangerous people he'd ever known were trying to balance their ledgers. He wished them luck. The world needed more warriors who chose to heal. In a refugee camp on the Somalia-Kenya border, a woman with brown hair worked alongside a man with graying temples. They moved through the camp's makeshift hospital with practiced efficiency, treating everything from malnutrition to gunshot wounds. The other aid workers knew them as Dr. Sarah and Dr. John, trauma specialists who'd arrived 6 weeks ago with impeccable credentials and a talent for treating the kinds of injuries that came from war. They worked in companionable silence, two people who'd learned to communicate without words through years of shared danger. Occasionally, someone would notice the way they moved, too smooth, too aware of their surroundings, or the way they both went still when helicopters passed overhead. But in a camp full of people running from violence, such quirks were hardly unusual. At night, when the camp was quiet, they would sit outside their tent and count the stars. Neither spoke of the past, of the ghosts that still visited their dreams. Instead, they planned for the next day's surgeries, the next delivery of medical supplies, the next group of child soldiers who might be convinced to put down their guns. 12 surgeries today, Sarah noted, updating her mental ledger. 3 of them children. Progress, John agreed. Slow, but progress. They fell silent again, comfortable in their shared understanding. They were still weapons, honed by years of training and violence. But now they pointed themselves at different targets. Disease, injury, the systems that created child soldiers. It wasn't redemption exactly, but it was a start. Miles away, in a Pentagon briefing room, generals studied satellite footage of the refugee camp. Someone had been hitting militant groups in the area with surgical precision, training camps emptied of children, weapon supplies destroyed, leaders who recruited kids found with non-fatal but career-ending injuries. Could be special ops, one general suggested. Negative, another replied. No unit claims these actions, and the pattern, it's like they're more interested in saving the kids than eliminating threats. Webb sat in the corner, saying nothing. He recognized the pattern, the precision, the focus on protecting innocence above all else. Phantom and Scorpion, still fighting their war, just with different rules now. Should we investigate? Someone asked. No, the defense secretary decided. Whoever they are, they're doing good work. Let sleeping ghosts lie. In the refugee camp, a young boy approached carrying an AK-47, almost as tall as he was. I'm hurt, he said, though no wounds were visible. Where does it hurt? Sarah knelt to his level. The boy touched his chest, over his heart. Here, since I started shooting. Sarah's eyes met John's. This was why they were here. We can help with that, John said, gently taking the rifle. But first, you have to want to stop hurting. The boy nodded, tears cutting through dirt on his face. Another child choosing a different path. As dawn broke, Sarah finished stitching wounds while John watched. That motto on your unit's plaque, medics do fight when love demands it. You lived that before you knew it. We all fight, Sarah replied. The question is what we're fighting for. A supply helicopter approached. Sarah instinctively cataloged firing angles before catching herself. Old habits. But seeing medical supplies instead of weapons, she smiled. They walked into the African dawn together, two medics who'd learned the hardest truth. Sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to fight. Sometimes it's knowing when to heal. The ledger would never balance. But perhaps the point was to keep trying, adding to the side of life. Medics don't fight, she murmured. Unless they have to, John finished. Unless love demands it. Medics don't fight unless you make them.